Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off, because today I'll be reviewing and paging through the Midgard Worldbook for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons from Kobold Press. Is this tome just chock full of great goodness, sure to bring a brand new world of adventure to life for your D&D campaigns? Or is this overloaded with every fantasy theme imaginable and a kitchen sink, making this book nigh impossible to use? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I am going to be reviewing the Midgard Worldbook 4.5e from Kobold Press in just a couple of moments. But there are two things I want to bring up first. Number one, this is actually the 800th review from the Gaming Gang. I know, pretty amazing. From such a little team, 800 reviews. I'm super proud of the team. Members who have come and go over the years. I know, for a lot of outlets, 800 reviews is nothing. But for us, I'm proud of the gang. Second, we are in the midst of the Gaming Gang October Spooktacular 2021. And what that means is each and every day of the month, you're going to find a brand new video over at thegaminggang.com. Might be a first look at a game or a review, such as this video. Or if it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, you're going to find an episode of my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, which airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at tabletop games. Also, every evening this month at 9 p.m. Central, you'll find me hosting an episode of an old school radio show that's sure to be spooky and put a chill down your spine. So all month long, be sure to swing on over to thegaminggang.com and join in on the fun. Okay, so that said, as I mentioned, I am reviewing the Midgard Worldbook for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons from Kobold Press. It's written by Wolfgang Bauer and Richard Green, with Jeff Grubb, John Sawatsky, Dan Dillon, and Chris Harris. Artwork is provided by William O'Connor, Brian Syme, Anna Meyer, Marcel Mercado, and Jason Rainville. The 460-page hardcover is available for an MSRP of $49.99. You can get the hardcover and PDF for $59.99 over at the Kobold Press website. Or if you just want to grab the PDF alone, you can do that for $29.99 over at DriveThruRPG. So let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got the Midgard Worldbook 4.5e. Few things I do want to mention before we dive in. First off, I've got a slew of Kobold Press gaming goodness on the horizon. I thought I would review this book first because many of the supplements and adventures that are released from Kobold Press take place in the world of Midgard. So I thought, hey, this is a great jumping on point for me to get a better understanding of the game setting. So that's why this is first up as far as the review queue. This is fairly new too. I believe this edition came out this year. We'll double check when we take a peek inside, but I'm pretty sure it's a 2021 release. Also, the fine folks over at Kobold Press were kind enough to provide me with this review copy of the Midgard Worldbook, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. And these days, it's very important that you know that. Lastly, I'm going to stay picture-in-picture up here. So I am going to be kind of cutting off part of the book in the upper left corner. We're not going to look at each and every page. I'm not going to discuss every single region in this book, but I am going to give you a good feel for what you're going to find in this world book, as well as some thoughts about using it in your own fantasy role-playing campaigns. So let's take a look at the back. Fantasy role-playing adventure in a dark world of deep magic. It is an age of war. Civilization slowly gives way to encroaching wilderness, and once mighty empires now lie beneath the waves. Only magic and the warmth of hope keeps lights aglow when dread things prowl and priestly wardings are bent by demonic rage. The omens are dire. The roads to the Shadow Realm are open again, and the Fae have returned to claim their ancient tribute. In the north, the giants prepare for Ragnarok, while the goblins in the west grow restless. In the crossroads, the shadow of the vampire princes falls across the land. The world serpent is stirring. Not even all-knowing Baba Yaga can say what will happen next. Now more than ever, Midgard needs heroes to stand against the dark, driving it back with spell, steel, and cunning. All right, let's jump on in. And we're going to start off with a little bit of fiction, just a couple of pages. So it is not like some game books where you have to, sit and sift through somebody's novella before you can jump on in. It's just a couple of pages long. Then we get into kind of an introduction from Wolfgang Bauer and our table of contents. The vast majority of this book is devoted to the regions, the countries in Midgard. There is some 5e crunch towards the end, mainly at the end of the book, in the appendixes, or appendices, as some people pronounce it. But for the most part, all of the information that is in this first 420 pages or so is not really reliant on mechanics. And that's something important to keep in mind, because I'm going to talk about that when I give my final thoughts about this book. So there are 7 rules that are essentially in place for the world of Midgard, the 7 secrets of Midgard. The world is flat. Dragons are based on elements, not chromatic or metallic, like you'll normally see in 5e. So they are elementally based. There is a dragon kingdom, which is pretty wild as well. The gods make themselves known. We're looking at kind of like Greek mythology, where those Greek gods would intermingle with just regular folks, with humanity all the time. We do have some hidden races. We do have the core D&D races present. We have some new races that you can play characters with. Of course, that information is not in this book, but we've got a lot of major races. They're very cool. They're a bit different. For an example, like we've got Minotaurs. You could conceivably play your player character as a Minotaur. Pretty sweet. Magic is based on ley lines, which is a concept that is utilized in quite a few different fantasy role-playing games. So it's somewhat familiar to some people. If you only play 5th edition D&D, it'll be something that's a bit different. There are also shadow roads, which are not of this plane, but they don't necessarily make up their own plane. So it's a way of traveling great distances kind of magically, and that's very, very interesting. There is kind of a meta plot going on in Midgard. That's the shifting borders and falling kingdoms. So I think, once again, I'm not positive, but I think Midgard rolled out originally 2012-ish, and there have been some changes going on within the setting. Time flies and status matters. So there are some very easy rules about time passing, which I actually like. And it's essentially just so you don't have characters that go from like 1st to 15th level in like a year, because that's kind of odd, right? You're looking at a much more epic kind of story going on. Status, I can understand status being important. You can try to utilize the rules for status how you like. I wasn't overly keen on them. We will actually get a kind of a list of the status, and it's as a starting character, you're just rolling a d6, and then you get a bonus based on race and your charisma as well. I don't know if I would necessarily do that, because, I mean, if a player wants to have a specific character of a certain social status, we're not talking nobility and things like that, but if they want kind of a social status of their own, I would prefer to allow them to just choose it. But I would actually use the social status rules as far as a guideline to adventuring in these various different regions. So we also get a bit of an overview of Midgard. We get a timeline of what's going on for hundreds of years. And we also get what's going on in the current day and important events that have taken place like in the last 50 years, which will actually have a lot of import to your adventures as well. So here we go with the recent events. There is so much going on in this book. This book is packed. It is jam-packed. Here's the optional rule with status, and it's showing your status level. So if you're a level 0, you're a slave. Yes, there is slavery. There are slavers. There are slave nations in Midgard. This is a bit of a dark sort of setting, a dark fantasy setting, but it's not overly dark. It is not, and I know this term gets used way too often, but it is not grim dark. There is hope. It is not, the player characters are heroes, or they could be anti-heroes. Because one thing I do like about this is it's not assumed that the player characters are all going to be goody-goody. You know, they're not all lawful good and chaotic good and neutral good. So I do appreciate that as well. So anyway, so that's our bit about status. So we've got the different races, right? So of course we got humans who, like most fantasy worlds, are the majority. We have dragonborn. We have dwarves. We have elves. And the elf marked, which are kind of like half elves. We have the gear forged, which are mechanical bodies where the person, the soul, essentially, has been placed into a mechanical body, or it could be kind of along the lines of cyborgs as well. It's, you know, kind of how you want to present it. Clockwork magic as well. We've got kobolds. Kobolds are very interesting. Hey, it's Kobold Press. Come on. They're gonna focus on the kobolds a little bit. We have the minotaurs, as I had mentioned. And one of the aspects about the minotaurs I think is very interesting is they are kind of a naval race. They come from this island region. So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of a nod to Minos in Greek mythology. We've got the raven folk, who tend to be evil. But keeping in mind, none of these races have to be played as player characters as evil. We also have the Shadow Fae. So those are goblins, some elves as well. We got different minor races that we get a discussion about. So essentially all the important, well, maybe I shouldn't say important, all the major D&D races are present, or cultures are present. So we get the travel times, we get different information about different festivals that take place. Some discussion about the ley lines as well, magic and scholarship. So this is another aspect of the book I find pretty interesting. We get the famous colleges of magic and where they're located. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to start jumping ahead because we're going to start getting into the regions. So once again, there is loads and loads of information here. Personally, I find that Midgard is a setting that if you're not too keen on the Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Ravenloft, if you're looking for still a high fantasy, high magic sort of setting, but skewing more towards like Middle Europe, Western Europe kind of mythology, the Middle East, as well as ancient Egypt, because each of these regions are different. And interestingly enough, each of these regions kind of tend towards a certain kind of adventuring, which I do like. Of course, you're not locked into that at all. But I really do like the fact that it's still high fantasy. It's still, lots of magic, deep magic. But it's different. It is not just your typical, hey, or, I'm channeling Greyhawk and Middle Earth and things like that. Also, even with all the information for each of the regions, and there are a lot of them, some things do not get tons and tons of detail about because there are actually source books available for them, including, for an example, the Free City of Zobek, which is one of the first areas that's discussed. So we've got these maps throughout that's going to show you kind of like, okay, so here's Midgard, and where is that area that we're looking at? What this map here, where is that in the great scheme of things? So we get a lot of maps. You'll notice that there's artwork throughout, but not tons and tons of artwork. So that does mean that some pages are kind of wall of text, which I don't personally mind because in my opinion, the more text you have, the more gaming material you get. But then again, I also like artwork too. So keep that in mind. But there is pretty good artwork throughout. Some pieces I think are more impressive or inspiring than others. But all in all, there's no terrible artwork in here. So each of the regions or areas are going to receive heraldry. So you're going to get a crest. Sometimes it's for the city. Sometimes it's for that country. So we had a good amount of information about the Free City of Zobek. But once again, I'm pretty sure that there is a Zobek source book from Kobold Press. That's one of the Gearbound. See, getting it right off the top of my head. The clockwork kind of race. So we start getting into some of the major races where you're going to find them. So we get the dwarves. Once again, these are the various different dwarf clans. So we get the heraldry from each of the clans as well. Even the human regions are very, very different. So Perunalia, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, is kind of an Amazon society. There are men present. Don't get me wrong. It's not, only women, but it is a matriarchy. So I found that very interesting. And they're known for their skill in archery. They're supposed to be the greatest archers in the world, even rivaling the elves. So once again, then we get the Dark Kingdoms. And the Dark Kingdoms are very, very interesting because not only do we have the Vampire Kingdoms, but we also have the Ghoul Empire. So we don't necessarily have like Drow. We don't have the Dark Elves occupying the underworld. They're ghouls. So that's pretty interesting. I know there is a big campaign adventure, The Empire of the Ghouls, that is fairly recent from Kobold Press as well. So if you're looking at much more dark, kind of horror adventures, then this is the area of the world that you're probably going to focus on. Something else that you're going to find throughout the book is you will have little sidebars discussing various things, including sort of right there, Adventures in the Blood Kingdom. So it's giving game masters a feel for what kind of adventures would you want to place within this region. What could you be looking towards as far as kind of theme-wise? I am skipping over loads and loads of information just to kind of give you kind of a higher level feel for the book. Baba Yaga is a major personality in Midgard. Religion plays a big role in Midgard as well, and each region tends to have different gods. So, of course, obviously enough, with the name Midgard, we do have Norse mythology as well. So there's Thor and Loki and Wotan or Odin or Wotan. We have a bit of a like Russian steppe sort of region as well. We have, here's the Dragon Empire. As I mentioned before, the dragons have joined forces and they have their own empire and evil, of course. And what they actually do is they have humans oversee their empire because it's mainly humans who live under the dragons. So pretty interesting here. There's kobolds as well. Kobolds are part of the Dragon Empire. There is a region where it's kind of grasslands, it's the plains, and it's kind of ruled by centaurs. So you could conceivably play a player character, which is a centaur. So, I mean, we're just jumping on through here. And as I mentioned, some sections are kind of like wall of text, but it didn't bother me much. It's not like you're going to go like 15 pages without an image. The Southlands. Now, the Southlands are more kind of geared towards a bit more along the lines of kind of like ancient Egypt and Africa. So there are these anthropomorphic cat people who live in the Southlands. Now, I will point out that very recent, in fact, it may have actually just come out today that you can actually order it. I think it is now in stock at Kobold Press. Is the Southland Source Book, which kickstarted not too long ago. I know the backers have received their copies, but I swear, I think today marked the first day that you can actually go and order the Southlands book from koboldpress.com. So we have a desert region. I mean, here we go. Here's our Minotaurs. Now, of course, these various different regions do kind of have their real world equivalents. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them do. The Seven Cities is interesting. If the way I look at it, if you're looking to run a campaign that's sort of a like Game of Thrones, a Song of Ice and Fire, where you've got a lot of intrigue, a lot of politicking, different kingdoms that are at war, this is definitely something you'd be looking at. All right, just kind of jumping along here. I do want to mention that we do not have a bestiary. There's no bestiary to this. Of course, you've got the accompanying Creature Codex. I believe there are 2 volumes of the Creature Codex. So the 7 cities are kind of along the lines of city-states. that are always at each other's throats. And that's why I said if you're looking for something along the lines of a Song of Ice and Fire, kind of get that vibe to your campaign, this is definitely something you want to jump into. Just kind of zipping along. But as I can show you right here, I mean, this is all kind of gazetteer information. Once again, as you can see, there's not a lot of mechanical crunch in this, and I'm fine with that. Now, some people who are like married to 5e, because this is a 5e book, they may want more actual crunch in this section throughout. Me, it didn't really bother me. The Wasted West is kind of bizarre because there's even a Lovecraftian aspect to the Wasted West with the great old ones. The Migo are mentioned in this book as well. So if you're looking, this is an area here that if maybe you're looking to have a bit more of a Lovecraftian vibe to your adventuring, this is a really good place to do that as well. Very creepy. I have to say, like I said, this is a kind of a dark fantasy setting. I really like it. I really like it. The Dust Goblins, your goblins come from the Wasted West. And of course, you have an opportunity to play goblins as well. Just kind of jumping on through. We're just past the halfway point of this book. Pretty amazing. All right, we got the Grand Duchy of Dorning. This is another locale that if you were looking to have a lot of political intrigue, have a lot of like social role playing, that this would be a really good locale. It's possible for the player characters to actually become nobility relatively easily enough in this Grand Duchy. We've got the Northlands. Now, the Northlands is more of a Norse setting, as you can see, with kind of like the Viking longboats here. But you also have the halflings actually come from like a winter state. The halflings don't come from like a shire, you know? So this is also very interesting up in here if you're looking to have more of a Viking kind of vibe to your proceedings. We have the Shadow Realm, which is, I was talking about the Shadow Roads. So this is where the Fae normally will dwell. And I believe, now I might have the title wrong, but I do believe that there's an adventure set in the Shadow Realm from Kobold Press, and I think it's the Court of the Fae. Now I'm just taking that off the top of my head. So if I'm wrong, I apologize for that. All right, so as I mentioned, religion plays a very big role in Midgard. Now, we're on page 344. So everything prior to this has essentially been setting information about Midgard. Now we're going to jump into the different pantheons. So we have our northern gods, which are in essence your Norse mythology. So we've got Loki, we've got Thor, there's Wotan, Odin, the All-Father. Just jumping on through here, we've got each region sort of focuses on a different pantheon, and the races also kind of feature different pantheons as well. So here we've got from the Southlands, the southern gods. As I mentioned, a real ancient Egypt vibe to it. Horus, Bastet. So you've got essentially a deities section in here as well. But as you can see, You're not getting stat blocks. The Go to the Woods, that is certainly Lovecraftian right there. So then we jump into the appendix, and we've got a new background, a Knoll Caravan Raider. We've got information about anti-paladins. Once again, as I pointed out, there's no assumption with Midgard that the player characters are going to be good guys and gals. You know, you can. That's why I got to be honest. I say it all the time. I don't necessarily use alignment for my player characters. I use alignment for monsters and NPCs and things like that. I'm not a huge stickler with alignment for player characters unless they're playing a class. So, for an example, like a paladin that is, you know, locked into an alignment. But for the most part, my players always play heroic characters. So we get some non-magic items. We'll get some new magic items. Unfortunately, not a bunch of artwork on the magic items, which is something that I always like to see. Talking about different alternate magic types. We get a bunch of new spells. We have new domains for spells as well. There's discussion about that. So we do get a good number of new spells. We get some encounter tables for the various regions of Midgard. I mean, you know, you're looking at 8 options. But I mean, I do like that this is here. I like this as part of the book, but I got to be honest, I'm not necessarily one who's real big on random encounters. Now, I'll take a random encounter table, and a lot of times prior to the game, I'll actually roll a few times on it so that I already know what's coming up. You know, it's a way to kind of speed up play. Then we got an index, and then we get some advertising of some other products as well. So here's the Tome of Beasts Volume 2, which I actually have a copy of. I'll be reviewing that in the near future. Deep Magic, which I also happen to have a copy of, so we'll be reviewing that. There we go. Courts of the Shadow Fae. Yeah, is that what I said the title was? I don't know. Of course, I also should point out, if you have not seen my first look at the latest of the Kobold Press adventures, which is Scarlet Citadel, that was on the live show just the other day. So definitely check that out. It's not a review. It's just kind of a first look, taking a peek at it. All right. So that is pretty much a lot of what you're going to find in the Midgard Worldbook for 5th edition D&D from Kobold Press. So let's swing on over to the other camera because I'm going to give you some final thoughts as well as my review score. I really dig this book a lot, a ton. I will say, if you use only 10% of what you find in the Midgard Worldbook, you are going to have an awesome campaign world for not only your D&D adventures, but in essence, just about any fantasy role-playing game. I like how we've got different regions that kind of promote specific sorts of adventures to take place. Not that you're locked into it. You're not locked into anything with this book. Because keeping in mind how I always run role-playing games is I don't use everything as written. I never have. I never will. Doesn't matter if it's setting, adventure, rules. It's just me. So, unlike, say, a Wizards of the Coast setting, let's say Forgotten Realms, where dungeon masters feel kind of almost like pressure to make sure that they don't change things up in the Forgotten Realms, that, you know, it's set in stone. You never get the impression about that with Midgard. And I like that a lot. Now, keeping in mind there is a lot going on. There are meta plots on top of meta plots that you can utilize, which will make for some exciting adventures. But once again, if you're not into it, you don't need to use it. I gotta say that I would be pretty excited as a player to be playing in many of the regions that are in this world book. Another nice thing too is you've got the opportunity where maybe you're running one kind of an adventure, more like, high fantasy, real heroic. And then you kind of like, hey, you know what? I'd like a little like Lovecraftian action going on. Well, shift the adventure. Shift it over to the Wasted Lands. Easily done. So I do really appreciate that as well. Gotta say, production quality is fantastic. This book is going to hold up to a lot of usage. The paper weight is excellent. Reminds me very much of European role-playing games where we got the really thick paper as opposed to, and no offense to Wizards of the Coast, but those pages are pretty flimsy in the adventures and the core books and that. That is not the case here. Like I said, really, really nice production quality. Lastly, do want to point out, this is a 5e book, but as I was talking throughout this review, there isn't a ton of crunch that's specifically dedicated to 5e outside of the end of the book when we start getting into the appendix and spells, things like that. For the most part, this book is system neutral, and that means you could utilize it with just about any fantasy role-playing game. So I could certainly see if you're a fan of, let's say, Dungeon Crawl Classics, but you don't want so much of a gonzo feel to the proceedings. You could easily utilize Midgard. Maybe you enjoy the OSR and you're a big fan of old school essentials. And their kind of core setting, Dolemwood, is pretty cool. It's very fairy tale-ish. Maybe that's not your bag of tricks. Midgard certainly would make for an excellent location for that as well. Hey, you know what? Maybe you're not super keen on Galarian. There's Midgard. So I think this is a fantastic book. I can't imagine anyone using everything in this book as presented because it would be super overwhelming. It really, really would. But there is so much content in this book. You really owe it to yourself to pick it up. Even if you have really no interest in the world of Midgard, but maybe you're like, oh yeah, you know what? That Empire of the Ghouls sounds cool. And that Vampire Empire 2 and the Dragon Empire, I like those. Then grab Midgard. Seriously. On a scale of 1 to 10, I give Midgard, get ready, a 10 out of 10. I think it's that good. I think if you are any sort of dungeon master, game master running fantasy role-playing games, you owe it to yourself to pick Midgard up. All right. That is it for this time out. If you happen to like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Central. I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at tabletop games. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for watching. And, of course, until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your very own gang. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel? Or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch? Or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel? And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.